Anora is truly an awful film, like truly a very, very bad film. I don't think it's anything special. It is the wokest, most horrible film ever, perhaps. Alrighty, folks, so of course the Oscars are this weekend, and we're gonna go through the various categories. I'm gonna handicap the Oscars for you. I have actually seen virtually all of the Best Picture films at this point. I know, I suffer so that you don't have to. I'm being joined in this journey by producer Phil, who's sort of our in-house film expert. And actually, Phil is quite good at this. How many of these films have you actually seen that are nominated for Best Picture, Phil?
I have not seen Wicked. I have not seen I'm Still Here. And I have not finished The Substance yet.
Okay, so this is good because our crossover here is not super high. The only ones that I've actually not seen are A Complete Unknown. I haven't seen Conclave. I've read the book, so I figured I didn't need to see the movie. And I haven't seen I'm Still Here. All the others I've seen. So this should be a good crossover. I think the only one that neither of us have seen here is probably I'm Still Here.
Yeah.
So okay, between the two of us, I think we can do this. So
let's try.
What's bizarre about this Oscars is how many nominations. First of all, Emilia Perez racked up. Emilia Perez racked up an enormous number of nominations, 13 nominations. The Brutalist racked up 10, and Wicked racked up 10. And Emilia Perez started off. This happens now almost every year at the Oscars, where Emilia Perez was the front runner, and then there was woke blowback, and then Emilia Perez was not the front runner. We've seen this so many times. We saw this with Green Room, we saw this with La La Land. Like this sort of stuff tends to happen a lot. What's bizarre about the anti-woke blowback on Emilia Perez is that it is the wokest, most horrible film ever, perhaps. And yet somehow there's anti-woke blowback because the person who is nominated for Best Actress, a dude, had a bunch of bad old tweets that apparently mean the entire film now has to be thrown out entirely. Now, the film should have been thrown out entirely in the first place because it sucks, but that blowback has now led to a sort of race for who is going to replace Emilia Perez as the frontrunner. Right now, my understanding, Phil, is that the frontrunner is Anora. Is that right?
Yes, it is. It got the Palme d'Or, and it has won pretty much every single Best Picture award you can think of, except for the SAG Ensemble Award, which went to Conclave.
So I want to go through each of these, and we'll do like some capsule reviews of these particular films. So Anora, as we say, is now the front runner. It's directed by Sean Baker. Sean Baker did The Florida Project, which actually I kind of liked.
Yeah,
and also did Red Rocket, which I did not like, and Tangerine, which I did not like. And Sean Baker is kind of this auteur director who apparently has no capacity to write, because Anora is truly an awful film, like truly a very, very bad film. The plot of the film is sex worker, meaning a prostitute, and meets Russian oligarch son. Russian oligarch son really likes this girl that he is paying to have sex with him routinely while he plays video games, and marries her almost on a whim. And then Russian family is like, this isn't happening. Nothing happens for about an hour. And then they kind of chase him around town. He disappears. They chase him around town. Finally, they uncover him. She realizes, as she should have from the beginning, that he's a douchebag. And they give her a little bit of money to go away. She takes the money to go away. And she flirts with one of the henchmen who's been sent to separate them. I think that's a fair summation of the plot.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. And can you believe that, I guess the director one time liked one Tulsi Gabbard tweet, and they're trying to cancel him for that?
That's hysterical. First of all, again, it is amazing. These movies are terrible. I mean, this is a truly awful film. It offers no character development. I think my favorite part of the film is there's a scene where Anora, who's the prostitute, is being confronted by the henchmen of the Russian oligarch's parents, or the Russian oligarch parents, and the henchmen call her a prostitute in front of her, and she can speak Russian. And she starts screaming at them. And all I could think of is, well, you are. I don't understand your objection. Literally, the whole movie is supposed to be an almost unapologetic look at sex work, meaning like, girls love it. It's super fun. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't damage your soul or you in any serious way. Even though, again, sort of the underlying thematic is that what she's actually looking for is to be a married woman in a normal relationship, and then she can't have that because she is, a prostitute. And so the film is in conflict with itself. On the one hand, it wants to glorify sex work. On the other hand, the thing that she actually is looking for is to not be a sex worker, but to actually be, like a traditional housewife who is taken care of, which is kind of hilarious. And I think perhaps the most fascinating part about this film is that it's been characterized as a Cinderella story. The problem is you can't have a Cinderella story where Cinderella is utterly unsympathetic.
Right.
I mean, Cinderella in this particular film is, again, a sex worker who basically takes advantage of what appears to be a 70 IQ, 18-year-old kid in order to get to his money. And somehow this makes her a heroine of the story and a victim of the evils of a society that won't accept the sex workers. That was my take. It's 93% on Rotten Tomatoes and then 90% from the audience. So I don't know what the audience is thinking other than their OnlyFans login was lost or something. So the Brutalist has also been nominated for 10 Academy Awards. I have many thoughts on The Brutalist, actually. I will say it's at least interesting. There's some things that are going on. I don't like the political take of the film. I think there is one move that is made near the end of the film. And again, spoiler alerts all over, guys. Like, if we're going through the films, you're going to have to actually deal with it. The Brutalist is beautifully shot. It's really well directed. The acting is across the board excellent. Guy Pearce particularly is terrific in this film. It makes no political sense at all. So the entire basis of The Brutalist, for those who haven't seen it, is a Holocaust refugee arrives in the United States. It turns out that he is a sort of master architect from the Bauhaus School. And he ends up doing the library for a very rich magnate played by Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce originally doesn't appreciate it and yells at him and doesn't pay him. And then Adrian Brody's character, who is this Hungarian artist, eventually he finds the Hungarian artist, tracks him down and says, I realize that what you did here is a masterpiece and I want to commission you to make a giant community center in honor of my mother. And so the whole movie is about the conflict between these two characters, where Guy Pearce is trying to get this thing built. He respects the talent of the Hungarian, but he doesn't like the Hungarian. But he kind of loves the Hungarian. It's like this bizarre love-hate relationship that he has with the Adrian Brody character. And the whole kind of thematic of the film is America is xenophobic. There's sort of a weird, badly done Zionist plot in The Brutalist. The big problem is that, number one, the case for Zionism is not only that the Jews need a place to go because everybody is constantly persecuting the Jews, which is true, but the case for Zionism is also, just as a Zionist, the case for Zionism is that there is a biblical basis to it. That Judaism actually believes that there is a holy land promised by God to the Jewish people. That's never dealt with in the film. And so what you end up with is Israel as sort of repository of almost anti-American hatred. That basically what Israel is a place for people to run away from America. Now, if you're going to set it up that way, then what you have to do is basically show that Adrian Brody and his entire family are deeply mistreated by America. And so from the very outset, this is the director, Brady Corbett's job, is to show that America is not all that it's cracked up to be. From literally the first shot in the film, which is this big shot where you see the Statue of Liberty coming upside down. And you see Adrian Brody scramble up to the surface of the ship that's taking him from Europe to the United States. And then the camera swivels upside down. And so you get the upside down Statue of Liberty. You know, right from the outset, this is going to be an America Sucks movie. And by the end, you also have a cross upside down. So it turns out that America is rooted in Christianity and Christianity sucks, which is why Jews apparently are victims or something. The problem is, Adrian Brody is not a victim in this movie until about 3/4 of the way through the movie. Meaning that Guy Pearce treats him badly at first, and then there's a read on this movie where Guy Pearce is actually, for most of the movie, the hero of the film. Meaning, he is a very rich person who finds an impoverished European immigrant, recognizes his talent, pays him an enormous sum of money to make him a monument on a hill that serves no purpose other than the charitable, and in honor of his mother. Hires a Jewish lawyer to bring his family from Europe and get them out of a DP camp in Austria. Have them live on his property, right? These are not the actions of like a typical movie villain. And so the entire movie is based around the idea that Guy Pearce is a villain, but then the first 3/4 of the movie don't set that up. So what do? They add in a rape scene in which Guy Pearce literally Adrian Brody's character. Now, by this point in the film, Guy Pearce is supposed to be probably 60 and Adrian Brody's supposed to be probably 50 in the film at this point. And it's absolutely bizarre, except that they had to do it because otherwise Guy Pearce can't be portrayed as the villain. And so they're making flesh the implication of the movie, which is that basically America its immigrant population for its talents and then treats them badly so much so that they want to leave. The politics are really perverse and disgusting. It's a very well-directed film, but because the politics are so perverse and because, again, the vast majority of the plot does not support the conclusion, all of this feels very shoehorned in the last quarter of the movie is kind of my take on it.
I think circling back to the scene you were just talking about with Guy Pearce and Adrian Brody, I feel like that was the least subtle thing possible. I feel like 99% of the audience was able to understand the allegory and the metaphor that he was going for, and then he just had to have that scene and have Guy Pearce explicitly say the things that you knew that he was thinking. Whereas just like 40 minutes ago, they had that scene between Harry and Zofia that implied something similar, but it was a much higher degree of subtlety that I think worked cinematically because it was showing, not telling.
And I think that Brady Corbett had to do that. The question becomes, why did they even do that? And I think the reason he had to do that is because otherwise the setup is Adrian Brody's being really, really oversensitive here, right? He's like, okay, fine. So the guy doesn't like you. How many people like their boss? How many people like the people who pay? I mean, aside from obviously all of our employees, like Phil loves me, but aside from that, I mean, clearly, I mean, it's not that we pay him to say that. He actually does. But most people don't feel like that they have to love the person who is paying them to do a thing. And so the problem is that unless you set up that Adrian Brody is literally a physical victim, then you cannot actually set up the rest of the sort of moral of the film, which is, again, made perfectly obvious in the last part of the film, because they fast forward to 1980, and now there's a big tribute scene to Adrian Brody's character, and they explicate that when he created this bizarre monument on the top of a hill in Pennsylvania, that actually it was supposed to be taking elements from Dachau and Birkenau. So the idea was there's some sort of continuity between Nazism and American industrial capitalism, which is just, I'm sorry, sick and perverse in every way that is possible to be sick and perverse. And anybody who takes away from world history that there is a similarity between people shoving you into a gas chamber and murdering you and your entire family and people commissioning you to build a tower on a hill in Pennsylvania, I don't know how far you have your head up your ass to come to that conclusion, but apparently that's about as far as Brady Corbett has his head up his ass. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, you know that creepy feeling you get sometimes, like you're being watched when you're browsing online? Well, here's the thing. That's not just a feeling. You're actually being watched when you're browsing online. Every time you hop on the internet, your service provider can see literally everything you do. And get this, in the United States, they can legally sell your entire browsing history. Yep, even that incognito browsing is not so private after all. Who would have thunk? Well, that's why I started using ExpressVPN. It's this brilliant app that encrypts everything I do online and routes it through secure servers. Since I started using it, my ISP can't see any of my browsing history, and that means they've got nothing to sell because they've got nothing on me. But here's what I really love about ExpressVPN. It also hides my IP address, so those annoying data brokers can't build a profile about me to sell to advertisers. Plus, it is unbelievably user-friendly. You don't have to be a tech wizard to use it. They've made it so simple, even your kids could figure it out. All you have to do is tap one button and get protected. They've got apps for all your devices. It's rated #1 by CNET, The Verge, and other major tech reviewers. Find out how you can get 4 months for free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. Again, that's expressvpn.com/Ben Shapiro Show. Okay, Conclave. I read the book, and so I could not put myself through the movie. The book was interminable enough, and I say that as a fan of Robert Harris, the guy who wrote the book. I've read a bunch of his books. So for those who missed it, I did like a little capsule review of Conclave, the book, as well, before the movie even came out, telling you what it was going to be. And indeed, it is that thing, because the movie is the book. Basically, Pope dies, time to appoint a new Pope, College of Cardinals all get together. Winner, spoiler alert, intersex person, because it turns out that all the cardinals who find this out after the person is made Pope, it turns out they all decide that it's important to violate all the vows they've ever taken in order to maintain the fiction that this person is actually just a genetic male as opposed to an intersex person who's actually female. So you have a lady pope is sort of the idea of this film.
Yeah, I felt like I was watching a Shyamalan movie in a way, because it was like this political thriller about who is going to ascend to the seat of the Pope, and then all of a sudden the Pope has ovaries.
Right.
It's like you're watching Split, it's about multiple personality disorder, and then all of a sudden he becomes the Hulk.
Right.
Bruce Willis is dead at the end of The Sixth Sense.
Right, exactly. And so I think that, like, the reason, and so this is the Catholic Church is mean and too conservative and needs to liberalize movie. Right?
I think that my biggest issue too is that they don't really process that revelation that he has ovaries in a uterus. That he kind of just says it, and then the film ends a minute later.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's true in the book also. Yeah. There's like a brief kind of internal monologue that the main character, who's played by Ralph Fiennes in the movie, does, where the main character is like, well, you know, I could say something, but I really shouldn't say something. Okay, I guess I won't say something. Mm-hmm. And which is really stupid, because really the entire debate theoretically should be about that thing, right? You should have a whole movie about them debating. We just appointed a pope. Right. What do we do now? You know, there's like the legality. Can you like, I don't know any of those procedures. Is that revocable? How exactly does that work? In this way, the sort of surprise ending, Conclave is very much like Nickel Boys. So Nickel Boys is a movie about a school. It's based on an actual real school in Florida that was a reform school in which apparently students were abused for decades. Some of them were killed and apparently buried in a field, and like bodies have actually been found. There have been reparations that have been paid to some of the families in the state of Florida over all of this. There's some controversy over whether this was just a generalized evil reform school that basically victimized all the people who went there, or whether it was particularly racist. And it's one of the controversies over the Florida school. Nickel Boys is a novelization by Colson Whitehead that turned into a movie. And the movie is fine, but it's not particularly revelatory. The reason I'm comparing it to Conclave is because the twist ending is that the character you think you've been watching the whole time, who's kind of in the future, in the late 1980s, who's deciding whether or not to go and reveal what happened at the school, that character you think is one character the whole time, and it turns out it's another character. The character you think it is was actually killed earlier in the film, and this person took that person's name and lived out his life, basically. That doesn't change anything fundamentally in the film. This is one of my problems with some twist endings in films. At least in Conclave, you can make the case that actually has some impact. In Nickel Boys, it really wouldn't have mattered at all whether the switch ever took place. And if one of the boys had been killed and the other boy had lived, that would have made no difference to the actual plot of the film. I think it's more of an explanation for why the kid didn't come forward, because he was actually, inhabiting somebody else's life. Maybe that's the explanation. But there's nothing particularly that changes what happened during the story that one character lived and the other died. You could easily have just left it alone. And I think the shock value of the switch is supposed to be like the big revelation, and just didn't do anything for me. As far as it being directed well, yeah, I think it's directed fine. I think it's interestingly directed, Nickel Boys, because it kind of takes various perspectives. It's done from first person. So you see the camera in the place of the person for one character, and then you see it switch, and you see the same scene from the character of the other person. And so, it's kind of a cool directorial trick. But we've also seen that with things like, for example, 1917. So I don't think there was anything particularly new about that per se. It's fine. I don't think it's an amazing film by any stretch of the imagination. The substance. Okay, so I did not hate the substance as much as I thought I would hate the substance. I don't think it's anything special. I think it's a body horror film. I think that it's being given all sorts of plaudits just because Demi Moore gets naked. And the entire plot of the substance is Demi Moore is an aging actress, and she's fired from her job by close-ups of Dennis Quaid eating shrimp. And then at a certain point, she's given notice, but she gets in a car crash, and at the hospital, somebody gives her notice of a thing called the substance that allows her basically to separate into two beings. One of them is a young version of Demi Moore, like a young, hot Margaret Qualley version of Demi Moore, and one is older Demi Moore, and they have to switch off week to week. So the basic idea is that her soul or her brain, whatever she is, inhabits one body and then inhabits the other body week to week. And then, of course, there starts to be tension because she wants to stay in the younger body. But then every time she goes back to the older body, her older body is more depleted because the younger body has essentially been drawing life force from that. The end of it is, of course, as with most horror films, some sort of sick horror explosion involving lots of blood. The movie kind of peters out around an hour 15. And then for 45 minutes, it just kind of hovers there. Nothing really happens between an hour 15 and kind of 2 hours. This movie at an hour and a half would have been a nice little horror flick. At 2 hours, it's really, really overlong.
It's interesting that you told me that this film is about the evils of sexism in America, because Vanity Fair told me it was a stealthy trans allegory.
Yeah, well, Vanity Fair is high on their own supply. And that was, of course, by a person, I believe, named Emily St. John or something, who is a trans person.
St. James, yeah.
St. James.
Yeah.
Emily St. John is the novelist. Emily St. James is is a trans person who believes that every movie is about him. And The Substance is absolutely not a trans allegory. It is about women aging in Hollywood and how they feel a lack of self because they're aging and because everybody is mean to them because they're older, which is clearly not true of Demi Moore, who's getting more work now than she's had in 20 years, by the way. The thing that works in Late Night with the Devil doesn't work for me here in The Substance, just thematically, is that the very basis of The Substance is that fulfillment is to be found in sort of youth and beauty for women. And so when she goes back to being Margaret Qualley, and now she's young, instead of utilizing her youth and beauty to actually do productive and interesting things, she basically F's around. I mean, that's essentially what she does as a young woman, right? She parties and she has sex with it. The idea that like what a woman wants most out of life, the fulfilling thing that is going to cause her to want to relive her life is to essentially, act like a teenager is really, really stupid. And so I don't think the movie flows in that way. And what would have been useful actually is if she'd gone back and she said, I want to relive my life. What would have actually worked? If she'd gone back and said, I want to relive my life as a young woman. I want to get married and have kids, right? That would have actually created some real dramatic tension, because then you would have had sympathy for the idea that she wants to stay a young woman and not be an old woman again. Like she has to relive her life because she made some bad choices, but it's none of that, because of course Hollywood could never possibly think that a young woman would want to get married and have kids.
That sounds like a Daily Wire Plus original.
It does. Yeah. So we're scripting it in real time. And finally, there's Wicked. If you want to see my review of that, then you can. Obviously, that did a lot of traffic because I liked Wicked. So Of these pictures, the best picture, the only one that people are going to be watching 10 years from now is Dune Part 2. The rest of these kind of suck. Wicked is fine.
So you think in an ideal world, Dune Part 2 would win Best Picture?
Yes.
Who's going to win?
I think, given the momentum, I think Anora will probably win. I think there's too much controversy with the others, and somehow the movie about prostitution and sex work with enormous amounts of pornography is the least controversial nominee on this list. But it just shows you where Hollywood is, right? Anora is the America is evil because it doesn't like sex work. The Brutalist is America's xenophobic. A Complete Unknown's just walked the line. Conclave is the Catholic Church is transphobic. Amelia Perez is society is transphobic. Nickel Boys is America is racist. The Substance is America is sexist.
The top three contenders are Anora, The Brutalist, and Conclave. Out of the three, which one do you think deserves to win?
I think all three are bad. And again, I'm speaking out of turn here because I haven't seen Conclave. I've only read the book. But my assumption is that the most interesting of those three is The Brutalist, which is at least attempting to do something thematically and at least is well directed and well acted. Well, folks, there is your rundown on everything Oscars related. I know it's a bit lengthy, but there are a lot of films there. And we'll give you, I'm sure, our full review of the Oscars themselves on Monday. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.